Hello, and welcome back to my channel. I am your host, Rosalinda. Hola, ¿cómo estamos? ¿Cómo andamos? I hope that you are having a wonderful, beautiful day whenever it is that you're watching this video. Thank you so much for tuning in. So today, as you can see and tell, we are going to have a little sit-down video, and we're going to talk about my personal experience and sort of what I went through as growing up as an immigrant, and I feel really how it has shaped me as a person. So really quick backstory. We got here when I was 8 to the United States. We landed in California, but mainly in San Jose, California, which is around the Bay Area. That is where my dad's side of the family landed when they migrated here. So we were over there from when I was 8 to 13, so from 3rd grade to 8th grade I was there with my family, with my mom, my dad, and my sisters, and like my grandparents, my aunts, and all that stuff from my dad's side. And then afterwards we went ahead and we moved to LA, specifically to Pico Rivera, when my mom and my dad separated. So I did high school here in LA, and I've been in LA since then, since I was 14. So that's kind of how we landed here. And I know that's like super fast general, but basically, and my mom and my dad will like separate for a while. Like they would be together, and then they would be together wherever they would be. Like if that was like when we were in Mexico, or when we were here. We lived like in Arizona for 1 year too. So whenever they were together in the same space, but then when they were separated, each of them would go to their own space. I think my dad would always stay here in San Jose, like where, you know, I think like he just, like that was his home base. My mom didn't really have a home base, so whenever they would like reconcile, she would just go with him. So at 8, my mom just decided that we were gonna stay here, that we were not gonna go back anymore. And so I think my mom just told us, or I think it was just kind of like well known, because I don't specifically remember like my mom sitting us down and telling us like, hey, you guys were not born here, like you have to have like some kind of papers, social, like all that stuff. We didn't like specifically sit down and talk about it. We kind of just knew it. Obviously we knew that we were born in Mexico, so I think with that comes like, okay, so I was born in Mexico, I wasn't born here, so I don't like have a social, I don't have a birth certificate or a passport from here. So it was kind of like just well known that we were not from here. And obviously like we were so young, so we picked up on the language like really fast. So to us, like it wasn't like a drastic like thing, right? It was just like, oh, we're living here like permanently now, right? So obviously when you're a kid, like just being an immigrant is just not like too like stressful or anything like that, because you're not thinking about like the jobs, right? Like you have to get a job, like what my mom was probably thinking and going through. But in the back of our mind, we always knew that like that we were not legally here. So we grew up in communities where there were Hispanics, so we never had like a super big like detachment of like our culture and our language and everything like that, because the community was really based on like what we were as well. The only time that I think like you realize that you're not from here is when like your friends during the summer would go on vacations, and then we would never go. And obviously we never went back to Mexico, so that was another thing, because I remember that we would go often. So I would tell my mom like, why can't we go back? And she'd be like, we can't go back anymore, like we're staying here, we're not gonna go back until we find a way to like become residents, and we can't go back anymore if that's what we want. And so from there, that's when kind of like my mom would have these talks with us, mainly just telling us, okay, look, you're an immigrant, you are not from here, so you need to be super well behaved if in the future you want to become a resident or a U.S. citizen. And obviously we never talked about like, oh, if you get married to a U.S. citizen, it's like the fastest, or this or that. It was always kind of like, as an immigrant, you kind of hope for like an immigration reform, something like that like happened in the 80s, that somehow everyone's just gonna get their papers, you know, one day. My mom has always been like, she always follows the rules like all the time, and she's always instilled that in us to follow the rules. But when it came to like following the rules and being like a really good just like person overall, it was really more prominent, because she would be like, you have to be able to get your papers, you have to have like no criminal record, you have to do good in school, you can't be a burden, like all that stuff. Like she would always tell us to always behave good. Like she never wanted us to go to the like principal's office. We couldn't get in trouble in school, we couldn't be doing like drugs, we couldn't be hanging out with like people that would put us in those kind of situations. They're like, you don't have, my mom would always say that we didn't have the liberty to be like the people that were born here. And so it wasn't like when she would tell us, you know, she'd be like, no se pueden portar mal, no pueden hacer esas cosas, no les van a dar los papeles cuando estén grandes, like that. Like it wasn't like that she was threatening us, but obviously when you hear that as a child, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, like I have to behave super good. So that totally shaped me to the person that I am now. And even growing up, like when I was in high school and there would be like those backyard parties, or you know, those underage parties, I had an ex-boyfriend that would smoke weed and stuff like that, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, get that away from me, like stuff like that, because I was like, I can't get caught doing any of these things if I ever want my papers. I have to behave so good. And I think that just goes back, especially because my mom, right, like she just told us all these things. It's just like immigrant mentality, to be like, I have to prove that I deserve to be here, I have to be the best, I have to be a role model citizen, even though like the citizens are not even role models, right? But I think that just goes to show what like an immigrant thinks and has to go through to like prove themselves that they can be here, right? And to eventually become part of like a legal society. So that kind of like it wasn't like terribly traumatic, but it was to a sense where I didn't really do a lot of things. Like I said, like I wouldn't go out to parties, I didn't really venture out into trying like drugs or drink alcohol and stuff like that, because I had to be really good. And that also helped me excel really well in school. Like I was a straight A and B student. I did a whole bunch of like extracurricular activities, I joined a whole bunch of programs, I joined sports. I did so much because I wanted to show that I was like a really good kid. And I wanted to show my mom that as well, because she would always instill that in us. And it just also goes back to like, I think like more than just telling us to behave well, behave really good for like society in a sense, because we were immigrants and we couldn't be, you know, we couldn't mess up. My mom always had a really good moral compass, which I think she has passed on to me. I feel like I have a really good moral compass, and it's because of all of that. And I sometimes, people like in high school or even now and then, people make fun of me because or throw digs at the fact that like I'm straight, what do you call it, like straight edge, like you just don't get in any trouble, you just don't do anything like illegal, or you just don't walk that path, like being in a situation that I can't control. And like, let's say being in a car, like when you're young, right, and you went to like one of those parties, which I'm pretty sure all of you guys have done this, many of you guys have done this. When you're at a party, you go to somebody's like house, right, and there's like underage drinking, you've all drank, you smoke, whatever, but those people are your ride. So then you get in the car and like obviously they were drinking, they're like under the influence of some kind, and like people would just still get in the car, right? Like stuff like that. Like I would be like, no, I can't do that, because how am I gonna get home? And then I would always have to lie to my mom, right? Like because we were going to a party and I would say, oh, we're going to the movies. Like I just couldn't, like my heart could not like straight up lie to my mom like that, because I knew that she would like catch me. And especially if I knew that it was like, that it was going to put me in a bad situation where obviously there was illegal things, I was like, no, I can't. So people would like make fun of me because I was like, oh, you're too good, you're like a goody two-shoe, or like you're so straight edge, like, oh, you're no fun. That's my favorite one. You're no fun, like, oh, you follow the rules, like that. Like, I always got made fun of, like, because of that way that I am. And honestly, for a while it would bother me when I was like in high school, but now it doesn't bother me when people tell me that. I'm like, so what? You know, like, I follow the rules, so what? Like, that's just who I am. And it extends from the fact that I grew up like in a panic mode and like traumatic mode as an immigrant, because that's what my mom would tell us, and that's what has stuck around my whole life, about not doing bad, about not putting myself in situations that I cannot control, and obviously not putting myself in illegal tendencies. So that like shaped me into the person that I ended up turning out to be. And obviously, even when I was like in middle school, I had really bad influences. Like, kind of like all the friends around, they were just bad. And but I would be always stray away from there. Like, you know, when you would get in fights and stuff, and I'd be like, okay, bye, like, I'm leaving. Like, I would not get down with like the fights with them, because I was like, first of all, this has nothing to do with me, and I'm not gonna get in trouble over this, right? And I made it through those bad influence, because then when I came to a new school, I didn't have like those bad influence, and I didn't have those bad tendencies. So then when I got to high school, it was like kind of like a fresh start with new friends. And then I joined sports, and I feel like sports really ground you, and they give you like a sense of purpose, and they kind of mold you into like a better kind of kid. Like, you kind of stray away from like the partying and stuff, because you want to do really good at your meets or whatever. Whatever it is, that whatever sports you're doing, you want to be like the best, you want to do good. So if you're staying up late to like 4:30 in the morning, if you're drinking, like, that all affects how you perform. And that was not me. I was like a little I was not even a little perfectionist. I don't think I ever called myself that, but first of all, I was very competitive, so I wanted to always do good. I always wanted to beat everybody and beat myself. Like, that helped me. And then obviously, like, when it came to my grades, I was like, okay, what's the highest thing I can be here? Oh, I can be on the honors roll. I knew I wasn't gonna be a valedictorian, but I was like, I want to be in the honors roll. So like, that pushed me to be better, when I know that like during those times, like, people just have fun and do a lot of things, you know, like here for school and all of that. There's like a big group of them, and I had friends like that, but I just always had my own path, and I just felt like I always had to be in that path. I think subconsciously, because of my immigrant mentality. And then once in high school, you really think like, oh, I want to go to college. So obviously, to be able to go to college and to get scholarships and whatnot, you need to have good grades, you need to have done a lot of like activities, be in sports. So all of that helped me. And again, I was like I had a vision of what I wanted to do. So all of that like kind of helped me, like the way I was brought up by my mom. And the other thing that it's more like on the traumatic side, is like, where you were here in Spanish a lot, like they would say a lot like la mira, right? There was like a lot of redadas like back then. I know that they're still happening now, but whenever you would hear that word, you'd be like, I would freeze, like, and then just look around and be like, okay, what, where, what? I would always think like, am I gonna come home to like an empty house? Like, are my parents not gonna be there? Is my mom not gonna be there? Like, what's gonna happen to us? Like, are we gonna have to go back? Like, that's another thing my mom never really, that's like the one thing that my mom didn't like traumatize us with, saying that. But the whole like mira and ice and redada stuff, that was mainly of like what you would hear outside. Again, because we were in a very Hispanic community, that was just like the talk, and it was in the news. So that was the thing that you would always hear. And I feel like I was a little bit more panicked when I was like in elementary school about that. Once I got to high school, the ice like wasn't really like in my front view mirror. It was more only in the back. I don't know why. Now it's just, in high school I turned more into like, okay, I need to get into a good college, I need to go to college. Like, then it turned into that, instead of like thinking, like worrying about like, where's my mom? Like, I don't know why I felt like safer in this area or once we were like here, once we were in LA, I just felt safer. Like I didn't really think about ICE as much. But I do remember my elementary school years, and even middle school, like I could not hear that word at all. But now, moving on, like during high school, I was always like, I need to go to a college. I need to prove that, you know, I'm a good student, that I can get a degree, and that I can get a wonderful job, a good job, and be like a really good part of the society. Like that's what I would think of. And obviously I always felt like if you were an immigrant and you got here, like, you know, fairly young, obviously you picked up on the language really fast, and you got the culture really fast, and you were more of like, oh, you were born here type of immigrant kid, right? Because you got here so young, so you got like the American way, or the American society or culture. So I thought, like, if you have that in you, then you have to go to college, and you have to like prove that you deserve to be here, and that you were meant to be here, and that you're here to do greater things. Like I thought that so much. So that's why I put so much pressure on myself to like go to college and get a degree. And also because I wanted to like show my mom that I could, right? Like I'm the oldest, and she always wanted us to go to college as well, and get a degree and get a good job. So it was kind of like me proving like society, or everybody, and my mom, like proving them right, and obviously showing them that I could do it. So I, like, college was like my number one priority, even though then when I started applying, I was able to apply to them. However, I think until I was applying and I was getting into the colleges, my college counselor told me that I couldn't get any financial aid because I didn't have a social. And so I was like, so how am I supposed to go to college? Like in my mind, is like I didn't even think how I was gonna go, just because obviously when you grow up like in a low-income community, a lot of people just tend to get financial aid. So I was like, well, what are you talking about? I'm just gonna get financial aid. But I didn't know that if you didn't have a social, you couldn't get financial aid. Like, no, the only thing that you can get is, in the time it was called AB 540. I don't know if it's still a thing. You could just get your out-of-state fees waived when you go to college, and you were an immigrant, you were considered out-of-state, and you would have to pay those fees. And I was like, okay, so what is that waived? And it's like, oh, this amount. And I'm like, what about the other amount? They're like, you have to pay it. And I'm like, I cannot pay that. Then my counselor at the time, he was like, look, he was like, I know that you want to go to a 4-year, but there's nothing wrong with going to a 2-year, then figuring it out from there. Maybe things can happen in 2 years. You never know, right? And I was like, okay, I guess I'll go to a community college. So then I went to Pasadena City College. Like, I don't know, I don't remember if I was still in school or like during like summer break after I graduated. But I went, and then I had to do a whole bunch of process, like papers. Somehow, I was not married yet. Somehow I found out that I could also apply for the governor's waiver, which was this waiver that California has, I think, which like almost everybody gets their 2 years of tuition for free. You just have to pay for your books and some fees and stuff like that. So I got that, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, so the next 2 years of college are covered. It's just gonna be my general ed. I don't even know what I want to do yet. So to me, I was like, oh, it's perfect. But Pasadena City College was really far from Pico, so I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get a car. And then I was like, wait, but don't I need a license? And then that's when like kind of like more like reality of being like a real immigrant hint. Because remember I said when I was a kid, it was mainly just like trauma of like the word ICE, or like having to like always behave well and not do anything bad. But now becoming an adult, it's like, okay, first of all, I need to go to college. How am I gonna pay for the books? I need to get a job. And I already had a job. You know how we used to get jobs back then. I had a job, but to me it was okay. Well, this is like nothing terrible because it's like the company is hiring me, but to me it's like getting a driver's license. It was like more like legal, like that was something legal. Like I would be driving without a license. Oh my gosh, that was so illegal. It like really haunted me that I was driving around without a license. Like I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. I'm so scared that I'm gonna get pulled over, that I'm gonna get my car taken away, that I'm gonna get a ticket, that I'm gonna end up in jail. Like all those things I would think, because obviously I needed to get to school. And at first, I think like maybe like the first month, because I didn't have a car yet, I would take the bus. Girl, I would have to wake up so early, like 5 in the morning to make it. And I had to take 2 buses and I still had to walk. So it was a lot. And then when I got a car, it was just like I was like on panic mode like the whole time. And it was like my first semester of college, because then during the semester Raul proposed, and then we got married going into winter semester. So like I had that kind of like really panic or like really stress that most immigrants still have to this day, to continue to have even after once they become adults in this country or when they arrive as adults. Like it was so stressful, and to like a person that did like good, or like a person that followed the rules, like to me like driving without a license was wrong. Even like working was wrong. Like I couldn't, I would always be like in the back of my mind, that would always be like a thing. Like it would stress me out a lot that I was doing these things the way I was, right? So then when we talked, and Raul asked me to marry him, and then obviously I was okay if I marry. At this time I knew marrying him would have been the fastest way. And then when we proceeded, and then we got married in January of 2010. In June is when I submitted my application and applied. So I did my whole first year of college without my papers. And then I went into my my first semester of my second year without them as well, because I applied in June, but I didn't get my residency. Well, I got my residency like in August, but it's not a residency. They give you a work permit. So they give you like just like a social, and it says for work only. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna change anything. It's just I'm gonna follow the process. So then in like November is when I finally got my actual green card, which made me a permanent resident. I've said it here before, but I was only a permanent resident for 2 years, because since we did the process so fast, you're kind of like on a watch list, because you got married so fast, right? So I only had it for 2 years, and then in the 2 years I had to like resubmit and redo the process again. But like when I got my green card, it was like official, like oh my gosh, like I have physical papers, like I'm a resident now. I have my social didn't say for work only anymore. I had my little card, and with that card I could travel. Like I could go to TJ. I can you know, if I wanted to go somewhere else I could. But when I got that, I was like, oh my gosh, like I felt like I could breathe. Like I know that this is like, what do you mean? Like I know, because I told Raul that. I was like, oh my gosh, like I feel like as soon as I opened the envelope and I took out the card, like this like weight was lifted out of me. Like I feel like this whole time I was like I wasn't breathing, and then I was just like like I relaxed, like even my posture relaxed, like everything. I feel like I was just like stiff, like I was going around the world like stiff. And to me, like it was something like subconsciously, because I didn't even know that that's how it was. But once I saw that and I read it and I had it physically in my hands, I was like, oh my gosh, like what a relief. And that's like something that you can't really like besides just explaining it like that, it was just like a monumental moment in my life. And that was only my green card. I became a citizen like 6 years after that, and that was also like so monumental as well, because just growing up as an immigrant, knowing that you're an immigrant, like, and then just living, you know, illegally, it kind of just dawns on you, and it's a lot. And I know that my experience might not be as worse as some other people that may have like families that have separated and whatnot, or the kids were here by themselves, or the parents were here by themselves. I know that it's not like that, but it is what I went through. And honestly, my life as an immigrant here really shaped me and shaped me into the person that I am. And also, as well as like the way our mom raised us, like she just instilled a lot of like certain values in us. And because of her, and I think because of the immigrant mentality of not getting in trouble, of being like doing good and all of that, I just developed like this really like strong moral compass that I have to this day. And honestly, it's like one of my favorite attributes about myself, that I have a good moral compass, because it extends from a circumstance that obviously not a lot of people have. And that is how I turned out. But obviously my sisters might be a little bit different, or they might have felt a little bit different. They were younger, so I don't know if they felt the pressure as well. I also think like how I felt about like having to go to college and getting a degree and all of that has to do with like also being an oldest sister, or being the oldest. Like I have to set the bar really high, and I want my sisters to have a good example to follow. And I had to show my mom that I could do it, that I was very reliable and responsible and all of that. Like I think all of that has had a role in shaping me and the way I am now. And obviously a lot of it is from trauma. Oh my gosh, you guys should have seen me one time. I did go to those backyard parties and the cops show up, and I'm sure the cops always show up to these underage parties. Literally, I was like, I'm gonna jump the barda. Like there's a barda, and I was in the corner. I was like, I can't be here, I cannot be caught. And like the girl that took me, she was kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm never bringing this girl again, because I was about to jump over. Like I was gonna jump to the next house. I was like, I cannot be caught. Like it was a lot of trauma, and I was always thinking like that. Like I was always on like high alert, like always así como too much, you know. And even to this day, I'm always like doing things, but that's like a different thing. But yeah, like it was traumatic, and in all sense of the word. But I think also with like now, and what I think I still struggle with it, because I still think about it once in a while. But then what changed for me is that once I got my papers, and I got them like so young, you know, I was like, I have to like prove the immigrant community, not prove, I have to show the immigrant community that I can like do more, that I can be good, that I didn't just get my papers so young just cause, you know, like I don't know, I just thought that. And so my form, my reason was to go to college and get a degree and get a job. Like I felt like if I didn't do that I was just gonna be a failure. And surprise to me, I still felt like a failure even after I went to college and I got a degree. But then I didn't do anything with my degree, so that was like another wave of, I don't know what I would call it, but it's like another wave of disappointment. Like me getting my degree, like first of all, really hard to get some kind of help when I went to community college. Like it was not that it was hard, it was just so many papers that you had to fill out, and so many places that you had to go. Like you had to spend like days there trying to figure out the right place to go. So I did that. Then I went to college, and I had to save up for college. Like I didn't take any of the loans. I saved up all our money during the year, our tax money. Like that's how I paid for college. Like I graduated with no loans. And then to graduate and then not do anything with your degree, to me I was like, what a failure. Like, what are you doing? Like, you had all this opportunity and you did nothing with it. Like, oh my gosh, that weighed heavy on me for a very long time, from time to time. Even talking about it right now, it'll creep up on me, and I still tend to think like that, that I let the immigrant community down for not doing more with the opportunity that I was given at such a young age, because I know that people still go around their whole lives, or maybe up to their 20s or 30s, without their papers. So I just kept thinking that I was just like disappointing, and I was just being a failure. Like, not only to, I mean, like when I got the degree, I felt so happy and just so accomplished, and I felt like my mom was proud of me because I have a degree. You know, she went to my graduation, I have the paper, everything. And even when I was going through it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy, like this is so nice. But then, like, you know, maybe even like 2 years after college, I was like, what am I doing? I haven't done anything. Like, I'm not even using this thing. Like, I'm such a failure. Like, failure was always such a big part of my vocabulary back then, because that's just how I felt. I felt like that to the immigrant community. I felt like that to my family. I felt like that to specifically my mom, to my sisters. I was like, what kind of example am I being? Like that, I just carried that. And I think that also just has to do with just all the pressure I put on myself and on my shoulders, like since being so young. Like, I just always felt like I had to prove, to somebody, to something, to an entity, that I deserved to be here, that I deserved to be in the place that I was, that I would do great things, and me not accomplishing those great things, like, really like messed me up and set me up for my own failure and like mental health, really, because that was like one of the biggest things that I would always often think about, how I was just letting everybody down. And I carried that for a while. Again, I still often think that I'm a failure, and I don't know when I'm gonna stop thinking that. I think until I accomplish something really huge and big, and I'm where I'm going to be, like where I think I'm going to be, where my dreams will take me. I don't know. I feel like at this point I have to accomplish something big for me to stop thinking that I'm a failure and that I have failed my family and the immigrant community. I don't let it, like, I have done a lot of work, and I don't let it get to me too much. But there is those days that it like really creeps up on me, and like all I think about is like how I'm such a failure. But I feel like this is just going to be an ongoing like thing, because you know what I went through as a kid, my experience, me being an immigrant, getting my papers, not doing much. Like, I feel like it's something like that I have to obviously work on myself and just changing it in my mind. And I feel like just that's not the case. But I feel like I'm always going to kind of just have this internal battle with myself, because nobody has ever put any pressure on me. Nobody has ever told me anything. It's just pressure and expectations that I put on myself. And if I don't accomplish them, I'm really hard on myself. Even till now, like, I think I've said it a couple times, like, I don't like saying something like, oh, I'm gonna do this, and like I'll just say it, like, and then I don't do it. Oh, it eats me, like, it eats me so much to that I said, oh, I'm gonna wear red on Tuesday, and I didn't. Like, it's something that I can, like, so that's why I don't like to say things that I'm gonna do, because I have to be like 1000% sure about doing them, because if not, I feel like a complete failure for not doing it, like for not sticking to my word. Girl, this is all has to do with just like the trauma of constantly being told that you had to be good, that you couldn't be wrong in any shape, way, or form. of hearing that like your family can be separated, you can be sent back, like stuff like that. And obviously just like super high expectations that I set for myself. But I think it's just like kind of like society and everything you kind of hear in the media, and obviously you hear with people that are against immigration and stuff like that. You hear that and you're like, well, I'm gonna prove you wrong, you know, like that. Like, I'm gonna show you that I can be good, that I can be great, that I can do great things. Like, I think that it's all compiled and has to do with, that is what you get by being an immigrant. And that is only my experience, what I went through, what I still struggle with even to this day, even though I have had my papers since I was 19. But it's still constant things that come to my head and that I'm always gonna think about. But I just wanted to kind of talk about just my experience, and maybe some of you guys can relate. Hope that you guys again take this with a grain of salt. That is what I went through as growing up as an immigrant, and the way it shaped me and it shaped as the person that I am even to this day. And I really hope and I wish for myself that one day I just would stop feeling like a failure to somebody. I'm still working on it. It's gotten way better, but you know, our days, when we have those days, everything just comes out. And I just wanted to say that because, I mean, like, I feel like a lot of us feel like that at some point in our lives, and it doesn't necessarily need to be because we don't need to be an immigrant to feel like we failed somebody, but it's kind of like so hard for us. Like, why do we put those expectations on ourselves to like, oh my gosh, you have to prove something, you have to do something, you know? It's like, girl, just live, do no harm, just live your life. But that was my experience. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for watching the whole video if you did, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.